Okay, we're going to go to part two here on the symbolism in ancient Egypt and 12 major things, but I think I've showed you more than 12 already and we're not going to have through it. So I'll just continue with the 12 list and keep talking about them. Again, if you haven't seen part one though, you can go to the very end of this one and it'll show up in your top right hand corner over here to go back to it. There won't be a part three, or it'd be over here in the top left. So something Egyptian probably, or something different that I've done about a month ago will probably show up there for y'all to look at the end of this one. So here's Sobek. He's the crocodile god. Again, there's that animalistic look. He has the stick that we just talked about here in the sacred counting of years. This is kind of an underworld deity, and indeed, a crocodile was a powerful creature that could take you and yank you down into the underworld. He'd take you to Davy Jones' locker and so on. So his symbology hooked up with it is definitely there, and you can see him right there at the weighing of the heart ceremony, where he's in the conglomerate creature that's going to eat your heart if it weighs more than the feather. And you can see him here also sitting up on a dais, where he is making the presentation just like he would be Anubis. And these things used to be mummified and set with them. And I don't know if you saw my video recently on Greeks in the Philippines, and then the one about armor and the origins of scaled armor. But in the origins of scaled armor one, maybe both, I showed this ancient Greek, which carries all the way through to Greek times, where they definitely still respected this concept, and this sea god Yam situation, Leviathan, hooked up to these ancient power beasts of old, and these lizards and snakes that we always talk about. And they had a whole coat made out of it. Almost looked like a duster, you know, something like Van Helsing would wear and stuff. It's pretty cool looking, pretty rad, and really made out of a serious full hide out of a giant Nile crocodile. And of course, these Nile crocodiles can get huge. I don't know if it's real or not, but last year they had one that looked like it was over 25 foot long that they had captured and killed, that they have people behind it. Some people say it's forced perspective. I threw it in one of my videos about Leviathan that I did last year, but regardless of that, let's go on to this. The worship of Sobek continued into the Ptolemaic and Roman times even. Cemeteries of mummified crocodiles have been found in Fayum and at Calm. Even in Greco-Roman times, Sobek was still honored, and I just talked about that in the suit and everything that went along with it. And they did a lot of the rituals and went through everything with it. You know, they kept the sacred there for a long time. It's sad it fell apart there at the end, but in ancient Egypt, there were several crocodile cult centers and also a large crocodile necropolis that they had made. The strength of a crocodile was a subject of fascination, and we also had awe over the strength that's basically all muscle. And I'll tell you now, they had worship of snakes and lizards and things, and of course you can see that in the Sumerians also, reflected quite well. And you also see in the Sumerian tale, they had the idea that it had eaten the plant of immortality that Gilgamesh could have gotten. It sheds its skin and becomes anew, and so on. And all the cultish snake worship that ran through, and it's shown symbolically in both of these cultures put together, where it seemed one of them had a little more snake worship going on. The other one had that bird and raven and buzzard, if you will, or the vulture symbology, and you can see vulture symbology all the way up to Göbekli Tepe and things. So this concept is nothing new, and that stretches down both ways. If you go to Göbekli Tepe and you come down and hit a river and run down to your left, you run right into Samaria, and you're going between the Tigris and Euphrates of the Bible. If you go straight down off of it, you hit the edge of the Mediterranean. If you follow it around, you run into a river. If you follow that river up, you're on the Nile. You're going into Cairo. There's the pyramids that aren't even there yet if you're the primordial people that are coming into there. But there were endemics from caveman times that were there too. And there's a blend, and genetics is trying to real truthfully pick it out versus what people have been doing about pottery for years and all this conjecture and stuff. And I've been trying to get with a couple of people here that seem to know in my comments and see if we can figure out a few connections to a few people. All it takes is a couple, and then you're like, well, that's it then. So let's continue. Sobek was the Egyptian crocodile god of strength and power. He's also the patron of the Egyptian army and royal warriors. His crocodile head was used as a recognition aid and a device to visually convey the powers, identities, and attributes of the god. You see that in a lot of cultures where they have a lion head thing or the wolves and so on, right? So Sobek had titles such as the Rager, Lord of the Waters, and Lord of the Fayum. Sobek was a 2,500-year-old crocodile worshipped in life by the ancient Egyptians and mummified with all due reverence after death. The ancient Egyptians worshipped this crocodile as the embodiment of Sobek, the crocodile god, and many were mummified after their deaths. And it's possible, I remember one guy had wrote a paper, man, this is 25, 30 years ago now, about how he believed that um, in ancient times, the very first few dynasties, someone had killed this giant crocodile and been part of the crew that did it, and just like killing the dragon of St. George and so on. And then he tried to correlate that with the same idea of St. George having done it, and this idea of killing the dragon or killing the ancient serpent beast situation. And also, that strangely correlates with this idea that I had come up with also way back before this time about ancient people having found dragon bones and then heads of triceratops, and coming up with ideas about griffins and things, and how they found leg bones, or they maybe even found one of those giant crocodiles that used to be there. If you've ever watched the Discovery Channel, they show this real good remake of these things with these longer snouted, gigantic crocodiles. And if they found one over there out in the desert or something, or dried up in wadi oases or something of ancient times, just the skull of it perhaps, or some leg bones, they know what they'd all look like, from these crocodiles. So in that same situation, they'd be like, man, this thing was big. And so was it some ancient primordial god, or they had this idea that lizards used to rule the world long ago, and perhaps man took that role over from them? And that'd be strange, because what is that, 65 million years ago and all that situation. No, maybe they didn't know that, but maybe they figured it out, or kind of did, and then had all this woo-woo that went with it that kind of has some reality to it, which is strange. Ooh, here's a neat one, the Falcon, and these air and flying gods, and this is the one that hooks up with Ra himself, right? So this is Horus, and it is symbolizing both together, but then the sun god, and you have this idea of a sun god situation. And the strange thing here too is there's 12 symbology that goes on with this too, and 12 followers of Horus, and then there's 12 steps or through the time of Horus. And also his counterpart in the Isis situation is again that ballerina situation. So this is a male of rebirth and the female of rebirth, and he's making the sun go and she's making the fertility situation. It works together. It's that same Venus type situation that we've talked about so much, and not too far off from Inanna. And let's see if we see more symbology just in this shot. Well, we see the Ankh that's held in both hands, right? And then if you'll look, what's held in the hand itself is an exact circle, just like Inanna's holding ring, and you can see it's bound in both hands. I think that's incredible right there. I mean, that's just, wow. Okay, so it's not just the idea, well, he's holding the sacred crest that they put the names inside of, but yet this is still over there in Sumeria. Might have a slightly different connotation to it, but not far off. And then the Ankh's with it here. Let me give you another idea where we might see this exact same thing today, put with a different bird, but with that same idea, and we use it. People may have thought of it already just looking at this picture, but we have an eagle that looks just like this, holding in his claws a symbolic number of arrows and stuff. This goes along with this idea, this concept. I could go on and on about that. I'm just going to go ahead and go here. So, yeah, it's, what? Oh, yeah, the embodiment of Horus, the falcon, wears a double crown. When the falcon represents the Egyptian god Ra, he wears the disc on his head. I thought they were saying that he didn't because he wore the double crown, and I'm like, that's the wrong picture then. But that's the one they were, okay, so, all right. Egyptians associated the falcon with the eye of Horus and the god Ra, who is most commonly represented as a falcon. The falcon was an important symbol of divine kingship. In the Pyramid Age, the falcon depicted was frequently in the written language. The falcon was the king of the air and the sacred animal of Horus, and the king of the gods and the lord of the sky. And this is whenever sky gods took over the world type situation. And it seems odd to me, and that's why I looked so deep into it when I was looking into it, that everybody ran through these little ideas, and they had this idea of this, weird Taurus and Leo, thing that had gone on. And then there was a lot of rams, and you see it especially in Egypt. And then it turned into fish kind of ideas at Jesus. And that goes with the ages of the Zodiac. Kind of blew me away, and these people were keeping up with it. But then finally ran into somebody that was like, oh yeah, of course, that goes right with this. We've known that for a while. And I'm like, that's not in any of these papers. And he just kind of leaned up and goes, you won't see that in any of the papers. And I go, well, why the hell not? And he goes, yeah, it's in a Bible thing. And I go, what? And he pulls open his drawer, and there's a Bible sitting right there, and he just kind of points at it, and I'm like, okay, all right. So, that made me feel weird. I often thought, after that point, it's like he goes, oh, he pulls it. Does he pull it out and thump his Bible every once in a while to these people just to run them off whenever they? So he can't. Anyhow, I'm just going to go ahead and go with this. Horus was believed to appear in the form of that falcon-headed god, and indeed, if you had a bird show up, like Beastmaster, if you ever seen it or anything, or falcon show up, it was an omen type situation. He could see all because one eye was the sun and the other was the moon. And so as the embodiment of Horus, the falcon wears a double crown. When the falcon represents the Egyptian god Ra, he wears a disc on his head. The falcon with a human head symbolizes the human soul. The other falcon gods are month, and you wonder where that word kind of comes from. The god of war within a crown of a tall double plumes, the mortuary god Sokar and the sun god Ra. And so that symbolizes the soul. But oh man, what was I going to tell you right up here? That so when you go through the number of the planets and the gods and the way it was supposed to line up, this actually ends up being what is it? March is what it would have correlated out to. The word month with the god of war, and then the god of war is Aries. And then if you look at the Zodiac and what times they give you, and it's like very end of March all the way through April, but it's not really that month, because way back when they went off in lunar cycles, and it really does put it right there and going off Aries whenever you line it up. Anyhow, depiction that they had it, and they showed him. You see Horus mentioning all the names too from back then, and he was definitely depicted as being the god of earlier. Oh yeah, they're well, this is something else and not it, but everybody thinks like the Egyptians, they had this whole little thing and it stayed constant, and they also think that about the Greeks with their pantheon and all their other things, but it actually blossomed over time and aspects were made. And indeed in Egypt, like Osiris wasn't formally worshipped until like the 5th dynasty, I believe it was. And later, around in 12th, like they talked about in here a little bit, things changed a little bit too, and then I believe again at the 18th and so on. I don't know, there's this thing I used to have in one of my books that showed you the little table thing that goes along with it, the whole double pages and all this crap that goes with it. But regardless, Uraeus that you have is definitely hooked up with a snake, and you also see it hooked up with a vulture next to it. We talked about how earlier, one side, when the two halves of Egypt came together, they had a little bit very similar things going on, of course, and shared things as close as any two people could have. And that's why they became one, and they ran off the same river and everything. I mean, when you need, I'll help you. When you need, I'll help you. They call themselves brothers. Here we go, and stuff. So they adopted each other's thing, and they put them together. And this is a symbol. Whenever they did this too, that's like, I'm cool with y'all, even though it was being run by lower or upper Egypt. In either situation, it kind of had the situation going on, and that's the idea of the double hat and all those type of things too. It's something that kind of signifies that situation. Oh, again, and well, I don't know if I said it earlier in the other video, the one I messed up did. Look how intricate, of course, this is Tut's mask and stuff, and you can see the inlay around the eyes and how just incredible that is, and the arching and how it fits so perfectly, right? And polished in. It's only made out of a few pieces, and they bevel it so it looks like it really is pretty much made out of one singular piece. It's amazing, but most of these pieces running back in strips on these hard angles here, by the way, are there's a lot of them that are pretty much one piece running almost back to here and then a crack back to there and so on. And there's some people that said that some of those weren't cracked in elder times because you can tell where they cut them at and it's very precise, and where it cracks it looks like crap. And so they can tell where that had happened on certain other things that they find too. And it's just shows you amazing craftsmanship, and this enamel workmanship that they did while making the gold too, that they started developing things is just incredible. Anyhow, according to the story of Ra, the first Uraeus was created by the goddess Isis, who formed it from the dust of the earth and the spittle of the sun god. Here we go again with this whole connection, and the spring and Venus and the whole thing. The Uraeus was the instrument from which Isis gained the throne of Egypt for her husband Osiris. And if you remember the story and how he got cut all up into pieces and the whole idea and coming back together. And they lost one part that a sacred fish ate and all these things. Let's continue. The Uraeus was the serpent which the king wore on a diadem, or during the Middle Kingdom, on his crown. The Uraeus which conveyed legitimacy to the ruler was represented by a rearing cobra with an inflated hood, like he's, Indiana Jones. As worn on the head, the Uraeus dates back to the forelock worn by the tribes in ancient Libya. The Uraeus was the protector of the pharaoh and was believed to spit fire at enemies from its place on the forehead. The Uraeus was used as a symbol of royalty, sovereignty, deity, and divine authority. It was the personification of the goddess Wajet, and then you have the blue eye and so on. The protective goddess of Lower Egypt, and one of the earliest of Egyptian deities, often depicted as a cobra. And you see this reflected in the idea of Indiana Jones, where in these tombs there's going to be these snakes. Somehow, after all these thousands of years, there's going to be a snake. There's going to be a curse. There's going to be a mold whenever you open up a coffin that coughs out in the air. And that's really true, by the way. And things that can really screw people up badly, and it can happen, So and they put that in D&D and everything. And when I started looking all into it, and it's because it comes from all these things. Of course, in D&D, you're going to booby trap the doors and do all this crazy stuff. We don't really find so much of that. The things that you want to have happen were, like, I don't know, whenever he goes through and he's got to bow down and the blades go over his head and all these things happen. It didn't happen, right? Okay, so anyhow, so it dates a lot to the forelock concept that they have hanging off their heads, and also behind their ears, or at the temple area. They would run that way down, and it would be a symbolic thing that at certain times, or in a Hercules type or Samson concept, by the way, they would have their hair cut off and stuff, and it would signify them having gotten married. Or you would say it the other way around, men with long hair were somewhat more eligible. Same things happened to women in a concept where whenever they were fertile, they had longer hair, even though they may keep it up but then let it down. But then whenever they got older, they would generally start waiting for Tammuz and cut off their hair once per year and do these other things. And they become part of what barren, I guess, is one expression of it. So in myths, the snake had many associations. For example, the eye of Ra, the eye of Horus, and the crown of Lower Egypt. So the Uraeus was also associated with Hathor, Bastet, Sekhmet, Tefnut, and sometimes Nekhbet of Upper Egypt, the vulture goddess up there, who was also depicted as a cobra. And oddity there is that you're seeing that a whole lot of things are overlapping each other in aspects of others and all that type of stuff. Yeah, that's the oddity of it. And there's also more than one religion, if you will, going on at once, but it's all the same. To them, it's all the same, and this is that, and that is this, and it all hooks up together in this Mother Nature-y type concept, and it's so complex, but yet, no, not really. It's just kind of attachments and things which are strange. Here we have the great blue heron, and it's known as the Bennu bird, and great blue herons are a sign of wisdom, and you can see that in the ibis and maybe the scarlet ibis that's red as a concept that you see in Thoth and these ideas of rebirth. And so this bird that emanates this concept shows you that, and then it hooks up. This is the phoenix of the area, and you wonder if there's any concepts that hook up to each other. The phoenix hooks up, of course, to the Phoenicians and the Canaanites that were there. The Phoenicians called themselves Canaan, but we also find it hitting Proto-Indo-Europeans, and this idea of this sacred bird that does this thing and rises from the ashes that goes all the way into China and the Orient. Yeah, yeah. And it goes definitely far all the way to the east. It's everywhere. This conceptive idea of the special bird of rebirth, but I keep telling you that birds used to be the thing that took the bodies up into heaven. They'd put them out on a dais. Before they started cremating the bodies, like you see in Conan that he does with Valeria, you would leave them up on a dais and you let the birds take it. There's cave art I showed in 2 different videos here since the first of the year that show it, and or at least one that show it anyhow. And in that concept, that would take your body and pick it apart and then take it up to heaven. Now we've adopted an idea that it's, of course, your soul, and it's not necessarily your physical form. Egypt is a little bit of a kind of a weird blend there of that idea where they protect your body and keep it exacting, but in the same concept of trying to keep it exacting for the afterlife. It's really your ka, your body, your soul, and things, and you form a brand new body at the afterlife. And of course, they must realize that because there's the mummy. But this symbolizes a phoenix bird, and there are phoenix is known as foin, or purple, or a reddish color, and it goes with that red ochre concept too. But the idea of purple, stay with me here, and phoenix, but also that goes with an idea of a fruit tree. Phonicas means date palm or fruit trees, and this idea of keeping people alive in a fertility time and stuff, and what you would eat and seasonal and all these concepts that go with things, and it's the clock of life, and then putting symbols on it, right? But let's look how deep it goes with the great blue heron, and of course the blue idea, and then Horus and stuff that goes along with that, and the idea and so on. But the eye of protection, and it just starts enveloping. The Bennu bird, or the phoenix, as they even refer straight to it, the inner cow, or Anurus, appears, and Anurus was a Greek inflection of the name of the god Hor. So this tells you that it goes with Horus, who was the son of Hay, and his wife was named Wabet. Here, worshipping the Bennu bird is the sacred phoenix wearing the Atef crown. Bennu bird is a symbol of resurrection. Now, Bennu is the Egyptian word for phoenix. It tells you just directly. It's an ancient Egyptian deity linked with the sun, creation, and rebirth. It may have been the inspiration for the phoenix in Greek mythology, and I'll tell you, it may go the other way. And I'm telling you that